In this full-length tutorial, I will teach you how to use pen, watercolor, and charcoal to create a portrait that is vivid and full of life. I used a grid drawing technique from a photograph to capture my self-portrait. If you're interested in learning how to do grid drawing, follow along with my full-length tutorial on how to do a 5x7 to 10x14 grid. Once you're happy with your grid drawing, erase your grid so your lines don't show up when you paint and draw. Divide your background into at least 5 interesting sections, putting a major facial feature in each of your sections if possible. I know you only have 2 eyes, a mouth, and a nose, but make sure that you've separated those facial features so you can try a new technique in each section. I'm starting with my pen drawing technique. Because it's so detailed, I feel like it's going to take me the longest. What you are looking for is value. Value is the lightness and darkness of an object. I like to map in my darkest values first, and I might not get them as dark as they need to be, but at least I know where they are. I'm using a variety of different techniques, and I have a value scale off to the side that I made earlier to help guide my work. If you're interested, click the link above for how to make a value scale using a pen. Once you have your darkest values, then I'm looking for where are my dark and medium grays. And I'm mapping them in using hatch marks, scribbles, all different types of pen drawing techniques. It's gonna look weird at first, so just keep going. And if you get nervous, I kind of started with the eye. Wouldn't it have been easier to start with the hair or an area that's not a major facial feature? Starting with my hair or clothing would have been a much less stressful choice. Our next technique is watercolor, and that is such a lovely way to add color and life to your painting. I'm starting with this pink magenta color, And with watercolor, I start with my dark areas just like I did with my pen, but I'm going to start with a middle value. Now, I've also made a value scale before I painted on my grid drawing that I spent forever on. If you're interested in value scales, I'm going to upload a video that shows you how to do all of these individual value scales. So after some practice, I'm filling in my darkest area with just kind of a light value first. And then as you can see, I'm overlapping with more layers of my magenta so that those areas get light. Now, you can't erase watercolor. So once you put it on there, you're going to layer and layer to get darker. But for your light areas, you want to leave it white. As you can see, once I have my areas mapped, I'm going back in with black. This is optional. You could totally leave it the way it is, just magenta. But because I'm using charcoal next, and I've used black pen before, I feel like the black just connects my values even more. So I take black to go overlapping, or to overlap my magenta so that it has the nice dark value that I want. Go light first and build your color. You can see I've made a mistake. My ear is completely filled in with pink. So it should be more of a white, or my lightest pink. I didn't rip my paper in half. I didn't scream or set it on fire. Or maybe I screamed, but I definitely didn't set it on fire. And just kind of go with it. If it changes slightly from your photograph, make it work. As you can see in my mouth, this is the scary part, and lightly putting in my middle range value that I'm going to overlap and darken. I know in the photograph my skin is white, but I like to put a light layer of my watercolor color to give my face a little bit of light and a little bit more interest. My final step is looking at my photograph and finding my darkest areas, the areas that are black. And I'm very carefully overlapping over my magenta, and I'm making my darkest areas in my mouth and nose. Like with my Sharpie areas, I'm going to repeat this in another section, and because I have the choice of color, I'm going to put another color in there. Yellow is my absolute favorite color, but in my opinion, this Prang watercolor set, the magenta and the blue just are so gorgeous, and I think they work really nice together. One thing I need to mention is not only should you practice your value scale so you understand how to make watercolor light and dark, you need to practice doing that on the same paper that you're using to paint. All paper responds differently to paint, and actually I'm not using watercolor paper at all, but I'm using a really thick paper, and I don't even know the brand of it. So before I ever did my grid drawing, I tested out my watercolor to make sure it would actually work on this surface, and luckily enough, it does. Last but not least, charcoal, or the messy material. Charcoal is going to get all over the place. As you can see, I've already practiced my value with my value scale over to the side. Check out my video on how to do value scales in a range of different materials that I'll be uploading. And with charcoal, I start as dark as I can go. So I'm using compressed charcoal. So it's not a charcoal pencil, although you will see me use one of those later. And in looking at my photograph, I'm drawing in the darkest, blackest areas of my photograph. This, I call it the blendy stick. This actually has a very fancy French name, but I'm not confident with how to pronounce it. It looks like tortillon, but I know that's not right. I think it's tortillon. I have no idea. I just call it the blending stick. And I'm using this to pull my darkest value to create my medium and lighter grays. This area of my face has a lot of white, and it also has a lot of small detail that the charcoal, I feel like, can't really get in there. So I'm relying on the blending stick to really create those lighter, more subtle values. And as you can see now, I have a charcoal pencil that I'm going in to do the small details in my eye. You'll see me use the charcoal a little differently when I do my shirt, because I use it on the side to create large areas of value, which is what charcoal is so good for. I decided that I couldn't stand that my eyebrow was not the right size, so I jumped back in with my Sharpie and I added some of that lighter and medium values that I forgot about the first time. Since I'm working with two different materials right next to each other, I kind of go back and forth to adjust it. And I'll tell you, I'm not happy with my eye or eyebrow for at least another 24 hours. My recommendation when you're working on something that's supposed to look like something else, like this is supposed to look like my face. So if I get something wrong, it really bothers me. I recommend taking a picture of it and looking at it randomly throughout the day when you're not next to your artwork, and that kind of makes you see things you wouldn't see when looking at the actual artwork itself. And I like to prop it up so when I walk into a room, I see it and notice different things about it. So take a step back, and if you get frustrated with your work, you can always come back and fix it. I really enjoy using white charcoal. I think it just creates such a beautiful range of values, and it makes a really nice light gray. I will say, once you get your light or your white charcoal in there, nothing's going to be whiter than the white of your paper. So be really careful with your lightest values, like you can see my neck. And don't overwork it, because you can't get it as white as it once was once you start smudging with your charcoal. So think about the white charcoal as your lightest grays, and don't overwork it, which is really hard to do when you're compulsive like me, and try to leave a little highlighter more that's just the pure white of your paper, so it doesn't get smudged in all one value. I always go back and add my darks because charcoal is so smudgy. I feel like it kind of disappears and I have to rework it. And the fancy blending stick is excellent for getting the shape right when the point of the charcoal is a little bit fat or obtuse and just doesn't quite get in there the way you want it to. Touch-ups, I'm ready to work on my background. I've decided just to repeat the same 3 techniques I've used, but do the opposite or different technique next to the one in each section. So for example, I'm painting my blue background in my pen drawing section. So just make sure that you mix it up so it's almost like a puzzle piece or a fractured work of art, so that your colors are balanced and that you have a nice balance of black and white. You want to kind of spread out your color and spread out your pen and ink so that everything has a nice flow. Although my background is white, I'm adding some pen drawing because I just didn't get enough of it and I love the pattern. So I'm making really big open sections so it's the lightest value possible without just being the white of the paper. I do kind of go back and add more so it's more of like a light to medium value, but I still think it looks really nice and it does contrast the black and blue of my hair. Major oops right here. I used charcoal and I had just painted, so you're gonna watch me tear my paper. I extend into the blue section and I make a little mess. So I try to clean it and I rip my paper. So to fix it, I just kind of outline it. I'm not gonna stress out. There's lots of details, there's lots of lines, and so there it is. So although I'm kind of making a mess, I'm just, trying to fix it the best I can. I would do charcoal last because it's so messy and gets everywhere. That way you can kind of control the mess a little bit. And in a perfect world, you would wait until your paint dried before you got all charcoaled up next to it. Told you I was obsessed with my eye and eyebrow, so this is the next day, so I've had time to look at this and be like, oh, there's not enough light value around the eye and it doesn't extend out as much. And so now that I've had some time away from it, I can go back and fix my charcoal to where I'm more happy with how my eye looks compared to the other one. In my background, I'm just adding a second layer so that my blue and my magenta pop. And then I said, hey, I'm gonna mix it. And so I put a little bit of blue and magenta together just to create another rich color that makes it stand out from the portrait itself. And there it is, a self-portrait using 3 really awesome and really different techniques. This is a time-consuming work of art. It's a little bit detail-oriented also, but the results are so striking. If you're an art teacher or interested in seeing my full lesson plans and student examples, visit me at thatartteacher.com.